Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we're going to be recapping the Super Bowl 59 between the Eagles and the Chiefs. Um, you know, this game got out of hand pretty quickly. It was 24-0 at the beginning of the second half, and so we weren't. Me and you were definitely not expecting this. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting the Chiefs to win this game, so it was very surprising to me that this happened this way. So, just some things to go over, but it's definitely the ending of what I was hoping was going to be something pretty historical, but for the
Right.
Chiefs.
Yeah, it definitely was a result that not a lot of people saw coming. Obviously, we were on the Chiefs side. It's not like I was just gonna hammer the
No,
Chiefs, or,
yeah,
or like I was extremely confident because on paper Philly had the entire better roster, better run game, better pass game, like better quarterback play of late, all that stuff, and really it was just kind of came down to this head coach and quarterback versus this head coach and quarterback, and
right, yeah,
trusting the one that is on this dynastic run, and obviously they did not bring their A game, and the Eagles absolutely brought theirs.
yeah. I mean, just talking about, and I'll pull it up now so we can see the board, but just recapping, just kind of the stuff that happened. Um, I don't think the numbers do the game justice. Obviously, if you look up
No,
there, I
not
mean,
at all.
pass offenses, of course, passing yards plus the sack totals. That's how they do it in the NFL. So it's 226. Patrick Mahomes actually had, I think, 257 passing yards. So I wasn't expecting.
And over 140 of that was on the final two
Yeah,
drives in garbage
exactly.
time.
So this is these numbers don't really reflect how this game went. It was basically the Eagles were just putting it on them the whole game, and then at the end of the game we saw garbage time touchdowns, backup players in the game for the Eagles. The touchdown again, Xavier Worthy's touchdown was on like the second and third stringers. So I was not that surprised. Kenny Pickett even came in. So
Yeah, and he completed a pass. I saw this one guy that had an over of 2.5 passers in the game, and obviously him throwing a garbage time pass at the very end helped him
oh
cash
yeah,
with like minutes to go. And I was like, man, that could have been a
that's
really
pretty
fun
good.
game.
Yeah, good like a
But
punter too. You know.
but yeah, it was so impressive from start to finish. The Eagles' defensive line just controlled and dominated the game.
Right.
It wasn't even close, and Kansas City really didn't make any adjustments. According to Next Gen Stats, I wanted to pull this up because it was a very crazy stat. The Eagles did not have a single blitz across the
Right.
42 dropbacks, and they still generated 16 pressures and sacked Patrick Mahomes a career high 6 times. And so all of that was done straight up by just manpower and just I'm better than you and I'm going to get to your quarterback and you can't stop me. And I don't know if I remember, even though we've seen some dominant defensive performances. I remember Denver versus Carolina when they were 15-1. Seahawks taking down the number one Denver
Yeah.
Broncos offense. But just as a defensive line from that perspective, since the Giants took on the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl and being a touchdown dog and holding that historical offense to 14 points, like it was that level of dominance. And yeah, it just really completely was unexpected.
Well, and what Kansas City scored 6 points in the third quarter and then 16 in the fourth. So, I mean, we were looking at a situation, and me and Taylor were talking about it. My wife, sorry, we were talking about how it was a possible, this could be the worst scoring difference of all time, which was the Seahawks and the Seahawks and the Broncos. It was 43-8 in that game, 35. That was the most, I believe, the worst in the modern era.
No, I know the Dallas Cowboys, they beat, well, it could have been tied because Dallas beat Buffalo 52-17. And
So
I think
35 points.
Yeah, and then the very next year, San Francisco set the scoring record because they dropped 55, but I think San Diego scored enough points to where I think it was below 30.
Okay, so 35 points. I was like,
Right, right there.
yeah, at that point, I was like, whenever we were talking about it in the game, it was like 32 or something. I was like, oh, well, they could easily get to this like scoring largest deficit of all time. Of course, the Chiefs come back in the fourth quarter to rewrite that, but it was basically that kind of game the whole time. Xavier Worthy, he had the bulk of the big plays and for the Chiefs, but on the other side, the Eagles, like you said, the defense, they just got the ball in the most like the best possible areas of the field, or they got a touchdown from Cooper DeJean, who is going to be one of our defensive players of the game.
Of all the birthday boys, obviously the big narrative was Saquon having a birthday. Well, Cooper DeJean also had a birthday, and he was the one that had that anytime touchdown.
First time to ever score a touchdown on a birthday, and it wasn't the guy we were expecting.
Nope, not at all.
You would have put your money on Cooper DeJean. That would have been insane. But yeah, so this game was basically out of hand the whole time. Moving forward, the Eagles, they're still going to come back next year with a young, very powerful defense. Their offensive line too. It's pretty young, so I think that they're going to just revamp, which is cool. I don't know how many of their guys are actually going on to free agency, which is something we'll be talking about very soon, coming up in the next couple weeks. But that'll be something we'll be looking at, and just kind of who could be leaving.
Well, they don't have. It's a bunch of depth pieces because obviously Brandon Graham is likely to retire.
Right.
Josh Sweat, who had 2.5 sacks, you said he was a defensive player of the game. He is a free agent. Zach Bond, first team All-Pro this year.
Mm-hmm.
Defensive player of the year finalist. He had a pick in the game as well. He's a free agent because he just kind of had the best one-year deal you could have, or performance you could have possibly had. Avonte Maddox as corner depth, but we've seen the corners that they've drafted. Mekhi Becton, who's had another guy with a resurgence. He actually got banged up during the game, did return, but he's, since they kicked him inside, he's really revitalized his career. But I don't know if that's because he's just on the best offensive line in football and it handicaps his capabilities. But he'll earn a nice payday because of that. But yeah, overall, they're probably going to have one of the most talented rosters from top to bottom going into next year. It just kind of remains to be seen if they can not have a hangover, because the last couple of times that they have gone to the Super Bowl in recent years, the following season was, left a lot to be desired. Most recently, remember, they started out 10-0, ultimate collapse, and then got blown out against Tampa Bay. And that was the questions of like, hey, is this the right coaching quarterback? And for now, they've put that to sleep. Obviously, Jalen Hurts has established himself as the quarterback of the NFC, top one most talented. He's earned that right at this point. Nick Sirianni, I don't know. It feels very Doug Peterson-ish. Like, what do you do? What does he do? But Vic Fangio, a guy, defensive coordinator, who basically everybody wrote off because of his disaster performance as a head coach of the Denver Broncos before Sean Payton came in, coming in and it's like, no, I'm a damn good defensive coordinator. Kellen Moore kind of got taken play calls away from him in Dallas and had to go to the Chargers. They kind of regressed, or at least Justin Herbert did, in the 1 year he was there, and then he went to Philly, and it's just like, third team in 3 years. That's how you kind of just never really rise, and all of a sudden now he's there. I think he's probably going to take the head coaching job for the Saints.
New Orleans,
I wish him luck, but that's not a situation to be in for a first-time head coach with no cap space and all that stuff. So hopefully they give him enough time to develop, because it's going to be a very rough start based on just the lack of ability to maneuver.
Right, and then if you look at the Kansas City side of the coin, we have Travis Kelce, who could be a retirement candidate this next year. Patrick Mahomes, of course, we're paying it forward, so he'll be there for 20 more years because his contract is just, I don't even know. They paid it for 10 years at this point, but they could just keep pushing
it. Restructuring it on top of that because of all the, extensions and highest paid. He all of a sudden is like the 8th to 10th.
Right.
So it's a very reasonable deal at this point because he did have the worst regular season of his career. Kind of stepped it up a little bit more in the playoffs, but obviously his worst Super Bowl as well, and it never really got going. He's always had like rough Super Bowl first halves, but then really turns it on, and he really didn't turn it on until the very, very end. But they just have a ton of skill players that are unknown. Obviously, both running backs, Samaje Perine and Kareem Hunt, were one-year rentals. Isaiah Pacheco never really got a role once he came back. I know it's a broken leg, but going into his contract year, I think they really need a workhorse running back. And this is the exact draft that you can lean into that if you're them. Trey Smith, one of the probably biggest priorities in terms of free agents. He's going to be a free agent. They need to figure out tackle because Kingsley Suamataia was benched, eventually got injured, and then they had to kick Joe Thuney, who is a 4-time Super Bowl champion, but at guard, they had to put him out at tackle because DJ Humphries also couldn't get the job done. Jawan Taylor's been a bust as a free agent pickup from a couple of seasons ago, so really it's just Creed Humphrey that's the steady guy, and then outside of that, it's just kind of aging out. Rasheed Rice coming off injury. Basically, all the receivers that were 1 year rentals plus Xavier Worthy, who really came on strong. And then Nick Bolton probably will be gone. Justin Reed, another high priority free agent that they may or may not bring back. So they do have some cap space, but a lot more role players compared to the Philly side of things that they're going to have to make some decisions on.
Right, and then I was going to say their whole, rotational defensive line is all going to be gone. Derek Namdi, Mike Pennell, and Charles Amenahu all are going to be free agents this year, so they'll all be questionable if they're going to be coming back or not. So we're just going to have to see with this team. I mean, we do like betting on them, of course, but they need to do some. Basically, it felt like this year they were just like, we have Patrick Mahomes, and that's enough to make it. And do it will win because we have Patrick,
right?
And that's just not what happened, obviously. So now they're going to have to actually really dig into the GM side of it and try to find some players that can help them. Because if Travis is gone, you're going to have to find a pass catcher, of course. It's not like we expect Noah Gray or Jared Wiley to jump in and just take over that spot like that. So
yeah, I do think that he'll come back one more year. I don't think he'll retire on this one, but I did say, even though we did pick them to win it all, that I expected this to be the last year of this era or run of Patrick Mahomes, and then they might have a couple of somewhat down years of their expectations. Maybe Patrick Mahomes statistically kind of gets back to what we have accustomed to see him being like, but in terms of Super Bowl results, AFC Championship appearances, just 7 straight, like something's got to give, and on top of that, only with everybody in the AFC West, like, it is a gauntlet, especially just from the head coach perspective.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Pete Carroll is the worst head coach, and he's a Hall of Fame head coach that I don't know if that'll work, but that's the worst one to deal with. And then, obviously, Sean Payton was the Coach of the Year candidate, and then Jim Harbaugh really turned it around as well. So I think the gap's going to be a lot closer, and I don't know how soon these other teams can actually kind of knock them off the high horse in terms of the division, keep on getting home playoff game after home playoff game. But, I expect some kind of tweener years for the next few until they kind of revitalize this roster.
Yeah, I think that also, and you talked about it a little bit, but they have 5 free agents in their wide receiver core.
Right.
So it's like, I just don't know where they go. They're going to have to attack. Of course, you want to get a running back in this class. Well, you're going to need a tackle, and you need a wide receiver, and you need other things. So prioritizing running back too early is going to be a problem. So they're going to have to find someone later, which is luckily it's deep, like you said, and we're going to talk about a lot this offseason about this running back class. It's the best ever. Like, I don't know if we can find another one that is this deep overall. So we'll be talking about that, of course. But they're going to have to find some guys that can play a lot quicker than maybe they need to want to next year.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it does help that they do have an extra, what is basically a late second round pick with Tennessee's pick, 66 overall. So they've got 5 picks in the top 150. So they can make it work. They've drafted well recently, but I mean, they got some work to do. They can't just kind of run it back as is and just see what happens and avenge this loss. Like, they're going to have to do some work to make sure that they can even reach that point, because there are teams that have closed the gap this year, and we saw that majority of the time this year they were really edging out games, even games that they had no business being close with. Kudos to them for taking out those games, but at some point that catches up to you if you just can't put it away like you're supposed to.
Yeah, and I mean I've heard a lot of people and all over Twitter and stuff, it's like, oh well, of course everybody wants to talk about how Buffalo would have done better, but Buffalo has to beat KC. They just have to beat KC. So, like, they have to get there. And I think they probably do have a better game than that. But I think if the Chiefs and the Eagles play 10 times, obviously this is probably one of the worst games we're going to see of that.
Exactly.
It's not like this is going to be a consistent thing. It just happened to happen this game out of all of them, big ones. So 9 other times, I'm still taking the Chiefs at least 5. So it's just one of those things that is unfortunate, and for the Chiefs at least. For the Eagles, it's awesome, and I'm glad to see all Saquon get a ring. I'm glad to see AJ Brown get a ring and things like that. Those are guys that I want to.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing. Obviously, Saquon both regular season and playoffs, became the all-time scrimmage yards leader in a single season. Even though he was kind of stifled for the most part in the game, Jalen Hurts made the plays, and outside of the one error when he was pressured up the middle, and he just kind of threw a lame duck.
It was a bad
Other
ball,
than that,
but yeah.
like basically that was the equivalent of last Super Bowl's performance, where he had an unforced error with his fumble, which was ran back for a touchdown, left them in the game. They were still up 10 at the half, and he played well the entire game other than that one minuscule play. It was the same equivalent in this game, and this time they just never relinquished that lead.
Yep. Yeah, that was a pretty terrible throw, but I mean, Patrick Mahomes didn't play well. I mean, he threw multiple interceptions, 3 of them, I believe. I think
he had 3. One was a fumble.
Oh, yeah, that's right. 3 total turnovers by him. But yeah, so
I kind of had this thought about Jalen Hurts. One more thing before we move on from him, but I was coming on the way over here. I was like, what can I compare him to? And he's a unicorn in terms of his play style, but just his demeanor and how he plays and when he shows up, he's basically Dak Prescott, but his biggest games come when they matter.
Okay,
but his intangibles, his leadership, bar none, great at the podium. He leaves a lot to be desired in certain areas. He misses easy throws a lot, and sometimes there's less turnovers.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, his big games come in the big moments, whereas Dak is the complete opposite, where his big moments come when the game's already decided, and there's just nothing to do. But his worst moments come in when the light shine the brightest. And I even saw how high his passer rating has jumped from low 90s all the way to nearly 110 from a Super Bowl perspective in his 2 games. And then on top of that, you look at his other 2 NFC Championship appearances. He had an elite game against Washington. Obviously, they dropped 55 on them. And then the other game was against San Fran, and obviously Brock Purdy went down, and then Josh Johnson got concussed. So he didn't need to do anything because they were just kind of playing against a handicapped team.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, he hasn't had a bad game per se in the biggest moments, which is really, really welcoming sight.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially, I mean, he's going to get paid what is it, in 2 years? Next year?
He already got paid.
Well, yeah, I guess it's a 4 year. So, yeah, he'll get 2 years.
He has one of the biggest bargain salaries in terms of all quarterbacks. I'm going to actually bring that up real quick.
Because I know it's...
Because I was I actually had that point last year that I was comparing Dak and what he was projected to earn versus would you rather have that or Jalen Hurts getting paid X? And then it's Jalen Hurts isn't getting paid anything at all. And right now, and again, this is after he was extended, filtered to all quarterbacks.
Yeah, it was 42.
So no, he is annually he is a cap hit of $21.89 million. So that is 18th in the NFL.
It's nothing.
That was below Aaron Rodgers. That was below Jordan Love, Tua, Kirk Cousins, Deshaun Watson. And then obviously there's a bunch of good quarterbacks, Derek Carr,
right,
to name a few, and then obviously Dak Prescott, his cap hit in 2025 until they're going to eventually restructure, but it's $89 million.
Yeah, I mean that's how you get all these other players around him that play so well.
Exactly.
The AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon, who all come in. Saquon is going to reset the running back market along with this draft class, so we'll see what happens with them.
Well, I'm just glad that it ended up being a very successful run. Both him, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, and I said that in another episode. But the fact that they were all able to make good teams better,
right,
and make them go even further in some regards. There's no reason the best running backs in football should be getting paid less than a mediocre wide receiver too. The highest paid running back right now would be basically Jacoby Myers' salary, and I just think that's wrong.
Yeah,
because I like Jacoby Myers.
Yeah,
but he is not nearly as valuable as an elite running back.
Who is the most paid?
Right now, based on cap hit next year, just because he just got extended, is Jonathan Taylor.
Okay, so
$15 million. He's the only guy.
Million. Yeah,
he's the only guy getting paid above 13.
Because I was going to say Saquon, and we made this case a long time ago, is the same as Darnell Mooney, and the same as Gabe Davis. Saquon,
his cap hit, and again, he gets incentivized, and there's other stuff. His cap hit is $6.8 million.
Nothing. Nothing.
You know where that would rank all the way for receivers? That is
40th.
That is where rookie Malik Neighbors is.
Yeah.
and Drake London and Garrett Wilson and Gabe Davis,
On their-
Khalif Raymond.
on their basic.
That is where his cap hit is.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's a real good thing that he ended up working out. Obviously, there was a lot of bad running back contracts in recent years. Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, to name a few, that kind of reset that and made people wary. But you can't just be afraid of having good running backs, because it really hinders your team when you just cannot run the football.
Oh yeah, to ask Kansas City over there, who had Kareem Hunt, who ran the ball 7 times with their actual running backs. Like you can't get away with that. So, and we talked. I remember on the broadcast they were talking about how Andy Reid came out and ran the ball twice on one of the drives, and it was good to see because they threw the ball like 10 times in one run or something. And I was like, yeah, I mean they should run the ball a little bit. I mean this is ridiculous. So. But yeah, guys, I do want to shout out, obviously, Josh Sweat had 2.5 sacks. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Cooper DeJean with the pick 6. And then Jalen Hurts is the offensive player of the game for the day. Let's take this off, though, and we'll get out of here. There's not really a lot to recap because of the fact that the score was so bad. But we can talk about, obviously, the legacies that are left behind for these types of games. So
plus, it was the result, honestly, that the public wanted, because they've been sick of the Chiefs, which – whether or not you believe that there's a controversy or conspiracy with the refs, there's not. But at the same time, it's when a team that's just up on top, when they get dethroned, that's usually very satisfying to watch. And I didn't really have a dog in the fight other than my lines that I put together.
Right, for sure.
And it didn't really matter. I just wanted a good game. Didn't really necessarily get one, but I enjoyed the result for what it was. I knew it was going to be either way. Philly just kind of blowing them out and really kind of playing their flag, or Kansas City was going to make history and be the first and only 3-peat Super Bowl team. Ended up going the former, but it was a good thing to see, and good way to cap off the season.
Yeah, and actually, personally, I thought that the flags were definitely more on the Eagles side than the game last night, because the Eagles definitely had more controversial calls go their way out of all of them. So. The only bad one that I was like, okay, Casey, you got one there, was when A.J. Brown put the hands on.
But then
the next possession exactly.
It was kind of nullified, and there was others, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, there's no conspiracy.
No.
It's just you see Kansas City on TV every week. So my problem is that they need to do a better job at making things reviewable, because certain things like the Dallas Goedert one where it was unnecessary roughness, in real time you're like, oh, obvious. And then after replay,
no, it was not.
His hands in the way.
Yeah.
It's not like a flop. It's just like, oh, after further review, there was one in the AFC Championship game where, the camera panned as Patrick Mahomes got hit, and it's like, oh, yeah, he just got effed up straight to the head, and he'd never hit him. And it's just like, if you had a reviewable play that actually can be tangible in how you review it, like, yes or no, did he make contact? That should be a reviewable play. Now, pass interference, which is very subjective, and it's hand fighting all the way, those should not be reviewable because it's a judgment call. But certain ones that it's like, the only way this is a flag is if this person makes contact with this person. If it's yes or no, it should be reviewed, and I think that they might look into changing that this offseason.
I also think the ref, like the New York ref, how they always talk about, there's a fourth ref, yada, yada. That should be implied more often, where that ref makes more decisions on things, because we don't see that unless it's like a targeting call. That's the only one that we actually see anything about. So I think that ref needs to come in and be like, hey, like this.
Well, this was the first year that the NFL kind of really enhanced the expedited review,
right?
Which I think for the most part they did a phenomenal job of, just like, hey, simple shit. That's just I have a better view. Obviously, that was not a first down. Move it back. Let's not go to commercial and spend 3 minutes on this. College was there was a couple instances in the college playoff that sorely this
Georgia
is obvious,
game. Yeah.
Like, what are we waiting on, kind of thing. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think for the most part it's fine. There's always going to be something to complain about, and at this point, because Philly just dominated Kansas City, that's just the thing that we got to think about for the next 6 months.
For sure. But we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We're going to start up draft is coming up. So we're going to start doing draft stuff, of course. Before that, though, we are going to talk about all of the divisions and how the outlook is from this point on, because this is pre-free agency. This is pre-everything. So we're going to talk about cap situations. We're going to talk about players leaving, players, possible options in free agency, things like that. For every single team, we're going to start, I believe we're going to go in draft order. So we'll start with Tennessee in the AFC South and go from there. And hopefully y'all enjoy the series. It's going to be me and Cam going through it. And then we're going to do all of our player rankings for the draft, prospect rankings. We're going to do mock drafts. We're going to be doing big boards. We're going to be doing everything. We're going to have a party on draft day like we did last year, where everybody comes and hangs out with us while we watch the draft. So it's going to be a lot of fun. This is my favorite time of the year, and football doesn't stop until after April. So
yeah, I mean, it even after that, it truly doesn't stop because fantasy football starts at that point. But this is going to be the full first cycle moment of like year 2 kicks in officially with this next series of doing the outlooks, because that was the very first thing we recorded last year. Obviously, it was clunky getting used to talking to the camera. We were in a different room,
it was
different setup,
whole thing,
all that stuff. But we got a year under our belt, and it's going to be a lot better. It's going to be a lot more fun, and I'm excited to hang out with y'all and keep on growing this community because year 2 is officially underway.
Yep, absolutely. So we appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we will see y'all on the next one.